morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to another post-cabinet press briefing. First, I want to wish all teachers across the island a happy Teachers' Day. We know things are challenging. We are facing COVID issues, but many of you, majority of you, have made the sacrifice, have worked really hard to ensure our children continue to get a good education. So from everyone here, we want to wish all teachers, all persons in the education system a happy Teachers' Day. This morning, we are going to be joined by our Minister, the Honorable Favour Williams. Also here to support is Dr. Grace McLean, who is Permanent Secretary acting in the Ministry of Education, as well as Dr. Kassan Troop, who is the Acting Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education. And also we have persons from the ministry here as support as well. I want to thank members of the media for being a part of this post-cabinet press briefing, and I'll now turn over to the Minister for her presentation.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Let me acknowledge Minister Morgan, our Permanent Secretary, Dr. McLean, our CEO, Chief Education Officer, Dr. Troop, members of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information's team, members of the media. Good morning, everyone. And let me join with Minister Morgan in wishing all our teachers happy Teachers' Day and to say blessings to all. Today is Wednesday, May 5th, and here we are again at another post-cabinet briefing. I'll begin with the decisions from Cabinet. The first is the inclusion of the construction of the Forensic Pathology Autopsy Suite and the construction of the Westmoreland Divisional Police Headquarters project into the Public Sector Investment Program. Cabinet gave approval for the construction of the Forensic Pathology Autopsy Suite in Kingston and the Westmoreland Divisional Police Headquarters to be included in the Public Sector Investment Program. Approval is also given for the provision of fiscal support. The Ministry of National Security noted that these two projects would positively affect the security landscape for a safe and secure Jamaica. The lack of an autopsy suite had resulted in several issues over the years, chief of which was the cost of outsourcing the services to privately operated funeral homes. Over the past 5 years, it has cost the government some $482 million for the storage of bodies. The land for the construction of the two facilities is secured, and the construction is expected to be completed in 2 years. The construction cost is expected to be about $555.9 million for the autopsy suite and $522 million for the divisional headquarters. The next decision from Cabinet is the agreement for cooperation in education for professional and academic support between Jamaica and the Republic of Cuba. Cabinet approved the terms of the proposed agreement of cooperation in education for professional and academic support between the governments of Jamaica and Cuba. The recruitment of Cuban teachers to serve in the education system commenced in 1997, as there was a need for foreign language teachers in Jamaica. Under the proposed agreement, Cuban teachers would be contracted solely as the need arises. The arrangement would not be at a disadvantage to the equally qualified Jamaican teachers who would be given priority in these instances. Since the inception of the program, over 370 Cuban teachers and professors, known as specialists, have rendered their services to teach in our schools and colleges in subjects of Spanish, mathematics, physical education, agricultural science, chemistry, physics, biology, and integrated science. The third decision is a nutritional support for students on the program of advancement through health and education path amidst the COVID pandemic. Cabinet gave approval for the advancement of $752.9 million from the 2021-2022 approved estimates. The said advance sum is to be cleared in the 2021-2022 supplementary estimates for the purpose of paying cash grants to parents or guardians of students on PATH at the early childhood, primary, and secondary levels for 30 days as a means of ensuring continued nutritional support amidst the closure of schools. In 2020-2021, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information collaborated with the Ministry of Labour and Social Security to provide cash grants directly to the parents of the PATH beneficiaries for the number of days that schools were closed due to COVID-19 pandemic. The cash grants were calculated at a daily rate of $100 for early childhood level and $150 for both the primary and secondary levels. The aim of the initiative is to provide nutritional support to students on the PATH in light of the adverse impact of COVID. In terms of reports, Cabinet received and approved the following annual reports and/or financial statements to be tabled in Parliament. Scientific Research Council 2019-2020, Independence Park Limited, April 2017 to March 2018, Jamaica Promotions Cooperations, JAMPRO 2019 and March 2020, Jamaica Fire Brigade 2013-2014, 2014-2015, and 2015-2016, National Solid Waste Management Authority 2019-2020. We move on now to the contracts. Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for the supply and delivery of 5 vertical turbine can-type pumping units and 2 spare turbines for the Pepper Relift facility in St. Elizabeth. The contract is in the amount of $892,357.90, and this contract was awarded to Industrial and Municipal Supplies Incorporated. Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for security guard services at the Ministry of Labour and Social Security offices island-wide to King Alarm Systems Limited in the amount of $253.3 million. Cabinet also gave approval for the award of a contract to Surica Development Environ Energy Services Limited for transaction advisory services to establish an integrated solid waste management public-private partnership project. The contract is in the amount of US $860,331.28 plus GCT. Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract to Marathon Insurance Brokers Limited for the provision of brokerage services for the Port Authority of Jamaica for the 3rd year of a 3-year contract, which ran from April 1, 2019 to March 31, 2022, with the following premiums excluding GCT of 15% for the 3rd year commencing April 1, 2021. Placement of US dollar denominated policies, which is $2.3 million, and placement of Jamaican dollar denominated policies, which is 18.5 million Jamaican dollars. Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract in the amount of $96.6 million for the Bay Farm Road Sewage Improvement Works, and this contract was awarded to D.T. Brown Construction Limited. Cabinet also gave approval for the award of 2 contracts for the supply of pharmaceuticals for the Jamaica Drug for the Elderly Program, the National Health Fund, for a period of 36 months. The contracts were awarded to Massey Distribution in the amount of $215.6 million and Facey Commodity Company Limited in the amount of $145 million Jamaican. And that ends the Cabinet decisions. Turning now to education. As you would have heard yesterday in Parliament, the Prime Minister made some announcements with regards to the continuing of face-to-face for students who are sitting exit exams I just want to go through some of the details here in case those were missed yesterday. So given the stark challenges wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic, the normal operations of our education system have been severely impacted, as everyone knows. Our school leaders, students, teachers, and parents have had to adjust to remote learning to include online learning, televised lessons, radio lessons, and learning kits since March of 2020, except for a brief time between December and February 2021, when some schools returned to face-to-face. Our students, as you know, have been mostly in the virtual space. As the dates for the exit exams approach, priority has been given to our grade 6 at the primary levels and grades 11 to 13 at the secondary level. That is the primary exit profile, PEP 6, ability test, the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate, CSEC, the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exam, CAPE, City and Guilds, and the National Vocational Qualification, Jamaica, NVQJ. This priority applies to our private schools as well for those students sitting exit exams. So we have a number of children who are registered. In fact, we have about 39,000 students who are registered to do the PEP 6 ability test, which is scheduled for May 26, 2021. We have 13,951 students registered to sit the CAPE exam, and 45,174 students registered to sit CSEC, respectively. In our public education institutions, there are also some private candidates for both CAPE and CSEC. These exams are scheduled to begin June 14th and will run all the way through to July 16, 2021. 24,000 students, thereabouts, are registered for City and Guilds. Those exams are scheduled for August 10 and August 11, 2021. 16,000 students are registered to sit the NCT VET exams, and those are scheduled for June 7 to June 11. Due to the pandemic, a significant number of the current exam cohort would have lost approximately 12 months of in-person instruction and guidance. School-based assessments, which would normally be over 90% completed in the month of March, when we looked at the statistics, when we did the survey based on the survey that was conducted on April 8th, only about 15% of CSEC schools and 26% of CAPE schools would have 70% of SBAs completed. Out of concern for this level of unpreparedness, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information took this decision to write to CXC requesting a further extension of the deadline for the submission of the SBAs to June 30th, 2021 without penalty. This was approved with an agreement for rolling submissions, meaning as students complete all or parts of their exam, they could submit those to CXC. And the new date would be June 30th, 2021, while all project type SBAs are to be submitted by June 18, 2021, rather than the May 31, 2021 date. In light of the foregoing, which is the inclusion or resumption of face-to-face engagement for students preparing for the 2021 sitting of exit exams, let me go that again. In light of the foregoing, the inclusion or resumption of face-to-face engagement for students preparing for the 2021 sitting of exit exams constitute a timely and much-needed intervention to better enable students to adequately prepare for their exit exam. And to that end, you would have heard yesterday in Parliament, the Prime Minister announced the resumption of face-to-face instructions for those students sitting PEP 6 ability test, and those in grades 11 to 13 to sit the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate, CSEC, the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exam, CAPE, City and Guilds, and the National Vocational Qualification, NVQJ. So flowing out of that are a number of things. All primary and secondary schools will be allowed to offer the inclusion of face-to-face effective Monday, May 10th, 2021. The schools will use a whole day or rotational approach, meaning not all students will be at school at the same time. Some students will be there for face-to-face, while another subset will work remotely. Systems are in place for all the teachers involved in the face-to-face instruction to be vaccinated as part of the infection prevention and control measures. Approximately 7,500 teachers are already vaccinated. Plans are in place for those teachers specifically who have to interact with students during the exit exams to begin to be vaccinated May 6th, which is tomorrow, Thursday. And of course, we continue to work with the Ministry of Health and Wellness to ensure that the remaining balance of our schools are inspected and approved. The ministry, we understand just the enormity of the situation, and so we have begun to coordinate with our transport providers to see how best we can make available solutions to enable our students to travel to and from school safely. Tomorrow we are asking all our students who are sitting exams, or students and their parents, to visit the ministry's website. We will be launching an app for you to put in your information, specifically in terms of where the student is currently and what school they're going to. We have quite a bit of information already, but just in case, we have that option available. Additionally, students should be in contact with their schools as well. We just want to know kind of where our students are, and so it would help us to better plan for the transportation. Of course, students are expected to wear their masks to and from school, and while at school, temperature check machines would be at schools, hand washing stations, sanitizers, and so on. We continue to be in a very crucial point in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, and so we're asking for extreme care to be taken, especially in the schools as it regards to seating in the classrooms, and asking our principals, teachers to really look at the timetable to ensure that you have proper sequencing of students in our schools, so we don't have a lot of students at school at any one time. And so with that, I will end this Cabinet post briefing in terms of the presentation and turn it back over to Minister Morgan. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Williams, for giving the updates from Cabinet. We're now going to move to the question and answer segment of the post-Cabinet media briefing. I'm going to remind our media partners on our Zoom platform to use the raise hand feature if you wish to ask a question. We're also streaming live on the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information's Facebook page, and so we want to make sure that those individuals benefit from the questions asked and the media host representing. So looking at our platform, not seeing any hands raised at the moment. Okay, now seeing Mr. Dwayne Anderson. Mr. Dwayne Anderson, could you just unmute yourself, please?
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Go ahead with your question, Dwayne.
Great. We've had reports in the media about some students, including over there in St. Thomas and Portland, who've not been able to, access any classes for over a year. Are there any plans in particular to find these students? Because we're listening to the numbers in terms of the SBAs that are being submitted, and those are startling. Are there any specific plans to reach those students who've basically given up school and have gone back to work, etc.?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to ask our Chief Education Officer to answer, and because I know we have interventions that are planned and so on.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, everyone. So yes, Dwayne, we do have plans in place to support our boys and girls. We have been made aware of the challenges, and as you are aware, we previously launched the mobile intervention, and that was specifically designed to reach those students who had difficulties reaching to school, and also to ensure that we endeavor for those boys and girls to re-engage with their schools. So whilst we worked with them in their local settings, we also worked with their families to get them back in their schools so they could get the expert support of their teachers. So you will hear some more, as our minister indicated, as it relates to the planned intervention for the boys and girls to make sure that we capitalize on the opportunity that we have now. So our Prime Minister and the Cabinet has indicated that we can now re-engage face-to-face. So our teachers will be working assiduously with our boys and girls to maximize on this opportunity. We'll be finding those students, bearing in mind that some of these boys and girls will defer their exams. This is an opportunity that was given to them in relation to the decision taken at COSAD for the CSEC exams. We have been working with the other exam bodies, and we have gotten opportunities for deferral for those boys and girls as well in City and Guilds. NCTVET has modified their approach as well. So instead of having them doing many of the practicals, they have modified the assessment to projects. And so the teachers are going to be working with these boys and girls to complete these projects so they can sit their exams in June. That's June 7th to 11th for NCTVET and August 10th and 11th for the City and Guilds. So we have been working with the examining bodies. We are listening to our teachers, and we are committed, our education officers, our teachers are committed to finding these boys and girls and making sure that they are ready. Bearing in mind, of course, if they want to defer, if parents want them to defer, they will have that opportunity. And again, our system will be adjusted to make sure that these boys and girls are supported for them to sit in January or June of 2022.
Thank you, Dr. Kassan Troop, the Acting Chief Education Officer at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Going to acknowledge Ms. Nadine Wilson-Harris. Mrs. Wilson-Harris, could you just please indicate the media house that you're representing? Dwayne, I'll come back to you for your follow-up question. Just allow Mrs. Wilson-Harris to ask her question. She had her hand raised earlier.
Good morning, everyone. Nadine Wilson-Harris from the Gleaner Company. I have a couple of questions, but I'm just going to throw two for now answer. As it relates to the SBAs, can you outline some of the reasons that have been given for the late submission? And I want to find out as well if this is likely to affect the day that the students will normally get back the results. And I'm thinking in line of in terms of matriculation into universities, etc., how this is likely to impact that. Also, my second question, the ministry has floated the idea of government funding extra lessons for students. Could you say how many students might be covered by the program and how many teachers might be co-opted? How much is the initiative likely to cost? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With respect to the SBAs, our boys and girls would have been affected by the disruptions that would have been brought on or occasioned by the pandemic. So some of them would not have been fully engaged in the activities at the school level, and so they were not given the opportunity to complete. For example, the home economics SBAs, they would have to do their practicals at school using the labs under supervision from external supervisors in addition to their teachers. Now, those opportunities were disrupted, and so our students would not have been adequately prepared or to complete their SBAs at this time, and normally we would have done that. So that would have caused some of the delays, and that is why our minister wrote more than once to CXC, just appealing for some consideration for our boys and girls. The deadline was given for May 31st for the submission, and through the intervention of our minister, we got our deferred deadline. So now our students can submit their SBAs up to June 30th of this year and without penalty. What that means is that when they are complete, when a school is complete, CXC has asked us to do a rolling submission. So once a center is complete, they do not need to wait until June 30th. They can submit, so we don't have the bundle and the bulk of the submissions at the same time for our Jamaican candidates. So those are some of the things that led to our students being unprepared, but we are not daunted. We have to work with them. Once they inform CXC that they will be sitting, our principals and teachers will just pull together and work with them to complete. Our teachers and principals have been anxious to do such. Every day we get a call appealing to us to grant the opportunity for the in-face or in-person instruction, and that is why our ministers went to cabinet, and we have now gotten the green light to ensure that we can maximize now. So those are some of the issues that we are treating it with respect to SVAs. As it relates to the...
Minister Williams will answer the question as it relates to the extra lessons and how that would be structured.
Okay, thank you much, Minister Williams.
Okay, with regards to extra lessons, of course, this is an initiative that has resonated with a lot of Jamaicans. They recognize that the children would have lost a lot of hours, a lot of contact time with teachers. And so the extra lessons is to help our students to begin to catch up and to move beyond where they were. So extra lessons is being contemplated for when we get back to normal. Standing here today, I don't know exactly when that will be. It's going to depend on how we move through this pandemic. What's the assessment from the Ministry of Health and Wellness? Our thoughts, our hopes are that by September, we will be able to be back in that environment, but that's just a hope right now, standing here. Of course, we're working on the details of it in terms of how many children would want to avail themselves of this, and that will help us to know how many instructors or teachers we will be required, where the students are located, how can we get students together, whether it's in the face-to-face environment or online. I am sure there will be a blended approach to doing this, just so that we can leverage it, we can scale it up across Jamaica. As to the cost, again, we're working through the details, so I wouldn't be able to present any of that today, but we have some time, because like I said, we're looking at doing this when we are able to get back into the normal mode. And let me say as well, just to continue in terms of the exit exams, this week, CXC will be releasing the broad questions. On Friday, CXC will be releasing the broad questions for subject areas in broad topics for the subject areas in the paper 2, which is the short essay type questions for the CXC. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister Williams. Just going to go now to Dwayne Anderson, followed by Javon Keys. So, Mr. Anderson, just please unmute yourself and ask your question. Your follow-up question?
Yes, Minister Williams. Is there any concern from your standpoint or from the ministry about potential lack of motivation among teachers going back to school in the face-to-face setting? I asked this in light of a little bit of a finger pointing in the last few days about how students have been performing, whether it's the teachers not doing enough, etc.
Thank you for that question, Dwayne, and I'd wish for you to tell me who has been finger pointing. Certainly not me. I have laid out what I thought we needed to do, the action that we need to take in the education sector, that all of us have accountability for students' achievement. The Ministry of Education, parents, students, teachers, every one of us have accountability, and I was very specific in defining what I mean by accountability. I said accountability is not the same as blame. Blame speaks to a punishment, and it's in the past, it's looking back. We're talking about accountability for the results, whether they're good or bad. And if they're not the kinds of results that we would like, what are the actions that we need to take to make it better? All of us in Jamaica want to see our students do better, not just some students. We know that there are many schools who are doing satisfactory, many schools that are excelling. But we want all of our schools, all of our students to be excelling. And in order to get there, then we have to be accountable for the results. Only then can we put in place the actions that will cause us to get high student achievement. And we know that education is at the base of everything. Education will help this economy to move forward faster. It will give us significantly better GDP growth. It will help in terms of reducing crime and violence. If you look at the statistics, it's persons who have dropped out of school, don't have the kinds of opportunities that they should have. They're the ones that are aggressive and visiting all this crime and violence on our communities. So we want to ensure that we have high levels of student achievement. And I am in the line as well in terms of accountability. And you can ask our permanent secretary and the chief education officer at the ministry how aggressively we are moving to ensure that we get the different programs, interventions. We have more information about our students. We ensure that we have just a continual in-service professional and personal development of our students, that we deploy the STEM methodology in our schools and ensure that all our teachers understand it so that when they walk into the classrooms, they don't have to guess and spell what is STEM. They understand it and they can just execute on it. And our children understand what we mean by STEM or STEAM education, which is the integration of classes. So you need more collaboration among teachers. We're looking at the common lesson plan bank for our teachers so they can pull down lesson plans and they can modify and help them to, in the classrooms, they can share lesson plans with each other. We're looking at a number of initiatives. If we were laying blame, we wouldn't be looking at it. Blame to lay blame is a dead-end street. That's not what we want. We want collaboration all up and down the education sector, those who are in it, those who are outside of it, to be able to move our children forward. The product of the education sector is high student achievement. That's the product that we all wake up, and whether we go to our offices at Central Ministry or in the regions or we go into the classroom, that is what we want to see at the end of the day. So I wish for you to tell me who is it that's laying blame. Certainly it's not me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Williams. We now move to Javon Keys from TVJ. Please unmute yourself, Javon, and go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. My question, well, I have three questions actually. My first is adding an extension to the first question asked by Dwayne Anderson, and this would be looking at the overall picture as it relates to truancy. In your sectoral presentation, that is, Minister, you spoke to a number of reasons why students are absent from school, but I wanted to find out if year to date we have a true idea of the number of students who have not been able to attend school in any of its iterations year to date. So if you have that number, I'd like to have an idea of that. I also would like to know what is the number of students currently opting for that deferral. I know there's an extension to May 14th now, that's for CSEC or CXC overall, but I don't know if you're able to provide a preliminary idea of the number of students who've opted for deferrals. And my final question is as it regards to vaccination of private school educators. I know yesterday in Parliament, the Prime Minister spoke to other educators being vaccinated. You mentioned the number of teachers now vaccinated as 7,500. Does that include any private school educators? And if not, when are you expecting to have private school educators being vaccinated as a part of the national inoculation effort?
All right, I'm going to ask our permanent secretary to deal with the vaccination issue. In terms of the reasons students are absent from school, as you would have heard, illness, rain, money problems, school not keeping. In terms of illness, when you look at the statistics, asthma is a huge issue for our students. But to get to your question about the number of students that are not engaged, we do have some numbers. I don't have it, about 120,000 students who are not engaged. They're not engaged online, they're not watching TV, they're not listening to the radio, they're not opening their books, they're not in contact with their schools. Even those teachers try to find them, they can't find them. And that's why you would have seen we launched the mobile intervention program when we were able to, and that was actually sending into communities, instructors to find students and have them in groups of 5 for 1.5 hours twice per week so that we could engage with them face to face. Unfortunately, we all had to withdraw again from school and go back to the remote environment, so we were not able to continue that program. But as soon as we are able to, we will again, because we know that there are many challenges facing students and parents. We know that not everyone has proper connectivity, and even in cases where they do, they may not have the money for the data plans and so on. And so we have to put in place, and we did. It was interrupted, but our plans are to begin it again as soon as we're able to. And in terms of the vaccine, yes, you want to?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Javon, we have prepared a list of close to 16,000 of our teachers those are teachers who are involved in the teaching of our exit examinations, of course, which would be at PEP, as well as grade 11, 12, and 13. And in that number, we do have our private schools included as well. And the number also include our principals, vice principals, and other senior members of staff. Based on the discussion with the Ministry of Health, we are currently now discussing the ancillary and other support staff within those institutions, and a decision will be taken regarding the vaccination of these persons before the end of this week.
Could you give a breakdown of that? I know you said the 16,000 listed, but could you give a breakdown as to the number of public school, private school, etc.?
Okay, so in terms of our public schools, we have 13,313 teachers. We have also included our Cuban teachers, which is 83 of that number. And we have a little over 2,000, about 2,100 independent schools, administrators, and teachers and teachers who are involved, included in that number.
Thank you.
Thank you to our Acting Permanent Secretary, Dr. Grace McLean at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. We're going to accommodate questions now from Mr. Jovan Johnson from the Jamaica Gleaner, and then we'll close it off with Dwayne Anderson. I think he has a follow-up question. So, Mr. Johnson, could you just please unmute yourself, and then we will acknowledge you.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, ministers. Good morning, members of the team. I have 3 to 4 questions. First to Minister Williams. What the Prime Minister had to say in regarding the Heart Trust NSTA developments in respect of staff and the concerns about the non-renewal of Dr. Janet Dyer's contract, and in particular regarding Edward Gabadon's and the reports that have emerged regarding him, his company getting a contract, Mr. Gabadon being, of course, the chairman of the Heart Trust NSTA.
Can we answer your question one at a time, Mr. Johnson?
Sure.
So could you repeat your first question, please?
What has the Prime Minister had to say in regarding the developments of the Heart Trust NSTA, in particular the reports that the chairman of the board, who is also the CEO of the Syncan Technologies, received contracts that raised concerns for procurement officials at Heart?
Well, I have not spoken to the Prime Minister personally about the Heart issue. What I am aware of, though, is that Heart has issued a statement on the matter. I'm also aware that the government procurement rules contemplates circumstances where persons involved in the government service at the level of the CEO, at the level of the, is it the CEO or chairman? You said CEO. Are you asking about the chairman or the CEO?
Was establishing the relationship between the company and the board chairman.
So you're talking about the chairman and not the CEO, because you said CEO earlier.
I mentioned CEO to establish the relationship. That is to say, what has the Prime Minister said about the reports?
Well, I'm not aware.
Officials.
I have not had a conversation with the Prime Minister about the reports. What I am aware of, though, is that Hart has issued a statement. We have read the reports in the paper. I myself am waiting on evidence of impropriety because the procurement rules does state that under circumstances where someone, like the chairman, is involved in the business of whatever, and the company wants to contract a company associated with that individual, that there are certain procedures that should be enacted. I am willing and wanting to see where those protocols have been breached and whether they have been breached. The mere raising of questions doesn't mean a conclusion of guilt. And if it is that there is evidence that someone has breached the rules of procurement and the public tender process, then those information need to come to the public so that the chips may fall where they may. But to answer your question specifically, Prime Minister has not spoken to myself about the matter, and the Hart has indeed responded to it in your paper, Mr. Johnson. Next
and just
question,
a follow up to that, Minister Morgan. The response that Hart said they were responding to questions I submitted. Among the questions we submitted were what legal advice, because the procurement officials who raised the concern asked for legal advice. We're still yet to know. Hart has not responded to say what legal advice was it provided? And 3, what's the total value of contracts that went to to Sync Technologies?
To answer your question, the first point is legal advice has to be dealt with in the way that legal advice is dealt with. I suggest that you submit an ATI request to Hart, and if the ATI law allows, then you can get that legal advice, which would be between a client and the lawyer. As it relates to the quantum of the contracts, you would also note that this organization, of which Mr. Gabbidon is a part, has had a long-standing relationship with Hart even before he became chairman. So is it that you're asking for all the contracts that he got before he became chairman, or you're asking for contracts that he had when he was chairman? Also, are you asking for contracts that would rise to the level of the board? Because you do know that the procurement rules has a number that goes to the board level, but if it is below a particular threshold, it doesn't go to the board level. So I just want to know specifically what you're asking, but nonetheless, I think that you should submit your questions to Hart as it relates to those 2 questions, as they would be most able to give you specific understanding as to the level of contracts and whether or not their relationship with their legal guidance would give them the authority, or give the legal guidance the authority to reveal such advice to you.
Questions we have submitted, Minister. So can I secure your commitment that they will provide the answers?
No, you cannot secure that commitment from me because I do not work at Hart. What you can do is you can use the legislated approach of using an access to information request if it is that an agency has been delayed or unwilling to give you the information. I have no control over how Hart as an entity functions. They function based on a statute. They function based on directives that are laid out clearly. If it is that you are unable or they are unwilling to give you information, the government has put in place a very effective mechanism called the Access to Information System, which I'm sure you can use to get all the questions you wish to be answered. You had 4 questions.
Sorry?
You had 4 questions.
Very well. This one is to Minister Williams. Minister Williams, as the Minister of Education and in light of the Auditor General, you indicating that in light of reports from the Gleaner that you've asked the Auditor General to expand the probe at the ministry looking into relationships with Western Hospitality Institute, the Joint Committee on Tertiary Education, the ministry, as well as following a report, the Center of Occupational Studies and the Career Advancement Program, which you understand has been restructured, all of which, to a large extent, had some direct supervision from the current acting permanent secretary. to whom Auditor General reports would go to for confirmation, for responses, etc. Are you satisfied that the current presence of the acting permanent secretary, given her roles in those programs and relationships that have been at the ministry for years, are you satisfied that there will be no hindrance to the Auditor General's probe?
Mr. Johnson, you're treading along a very dangerous ground. The Auditor General conducts audits in ministries consistently over time. If it is that you're suggesting that the mere raising of an accusation not yet borne out in fact should cause the moving of someone who has served the public service for many years, who is a public servant, where we have had rulings from the IDT and other constituted authorities that removing someone in the midst of an investigation where there is no evidence of wrongdoing could be considered justiciable and could open the government to liability, I suggest to you that you're treading on a dangerous ground. The other thing I wish to say to you as well is that the Ministry of Education under the leadership of Favour Williams is very committed to the whole issue of probity, transparency and accountability. When issues were raised about the Western Hospitality Institute, we reached out to the Auditor General for there to be a transparent probe. The layers of accountability that exist within the system allows that sort of engagement to take place. But we have yet to hear factually what evidence has been brought forward of impropriety. But that is not our duty to conclude. That is the duty of the constituted authority to conclude. But we have not seen where you can be now suggesting that you remove an individual from their job because you have raised a suspicion about their actions. Minister? I don't think Minister needs to say anything further on that. Do you have another question? You said 4, you have gone 3.
I do, but I just want to be clear in respect of that previous question that we've not raised an accusation. What we're saying or asking is that in light of the roles that the acting permanent secretary played in those programs, and the role that
but the acting permanent secretary plays roles in every single program in the ministry.
But
so
she was an acting chief education officer at the time, Minister.
Mr. Johnson, the acting permanent secretary is, based on the laws of the land, the accounting officer in the Ministry of Education. Any program, and she works alongside the CEO, every single program that exists in the Ministry of Education, the acting permanent secretary and the CEO plays a role in it. So if every time there's an audit or a probe, we should start removing people simply because Javon Johnson raised a question, then there will be nobody left in government to do the work. The point I'm making to you, Mr. Johnson, is this. We have constituted authorities which are authorized and empowered to investigate matters of public concern. Yourself, in your paper, have raised questions about issues within the ministry. It is within the right of the Auditor General, and we support the audit 100%. She's carrying out her audit, she's looking in, and we are cooperating with her 100%. But we do not know if your questions rise to a prima facie case against anyone. You have raised questions. As you said, you have not made accusations. I think we should allow the constituted authority who are legally empowered to do their investigation, to do their work. Please, I do not think it is appropriate to victimize individuals without evidence. That was question number 4, Mr. Johnson.
Just to reject that we have not victimized anyone. But the fifth
No, I never said you did. I never said you did.
The fourth question,
I want
Minister.
to be clear, Mr. Johnson. I never said you victimized anyone. I made a general statement that we should not victimize people without evidence. I never said you are victimizing anyone. We need to be clear.
Sure.
What was your next question, sir?
The other question, this is the last question in relation to that matter, then a final one. This is to Acting PS Dr. McLean to confirm whether you've had any business relationships at all, or outside of relations with the Ministry of Education, with Dr. Cecil Cornwall from the Western Hospitality Institute. And the final question, Minister Morgan, is could you provide an update on the investigations in respect of the Jam COVID Amber breaches?
As it relates to the Jam COVID Amber breaches, I have not received a report from the Minister of National Security as it relates to that. I think that to get a quicker response, you could approach the Ministry of National Security. If you had asked earlier, I would have gotten the report, but I did not know you would ask the question. So in order not to wait a couple of days, you can just reach out to the Ministry of National Security to get the report on the Jam COVID. PS, would you like to respond?
Javon, I'm not sure what is your understanding of business relationship. I'm a civil servant. I work in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. I support all the stakeholders, those who do business with the ministry. I also support our students, our teachers, and just about anyone who we have to interface with at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. As a civil servant, there can be no business relationship based on the staff orders unless it is fully approved. And I can say with all sincerity that I have no business relationship with anyone within or outside of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information.
Thank you so much to our acting permanent secretary, Dr. Grace McLean. The final question now. Okay, I see Mr. Keys, but let's allow Nadine Wilson-Harris to ask her question. She has been waiting for some time. And Ms. Wilson-Harris, could you just ask your question, and we will wrap up the press conference shortly after.
Okay, 2 questions. Minister Williams had touched on the whole issue of coordinating with transport providers to take students to school. Just wanted to find out a bit more on, just wanted to find out who exactly are some of these transport providers that has been the coordination has started with, and is the government planning to finance transportation for students in the 350 schools, and what's the estimate for that spend? And the second question I have, Labour Minister Carl Samuda has indicated that MPs will have a greater role in selections for the farm work program. Just wondering, isn't that move likely to undermine the transparency and undercut the role of state organizations, especially in light of calls in Parliament to use it for a fraud probe by the Auditor General? Thank you.
Sure. So Nadine, let me take your first question in terms of coordinating transport for our students. Currently in our system, we do coordinate transport for many of our rural students who are on PATH. So it's not unusual for us to do so. Within what we're doing this time, given that we are in this very kind of dangerous point in the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to ensure that our students go to school and from school to home safely. And so we would be coordinating with the JUTC in the corporate area to see how best we can utilize their system. We are going to try to start school later so students don't have to be commingled with the general population as they move about. Some of the things we're looking at to see if it is at all possible for there to be dedicated buses that would take our students, especially if we know where the bulk of them are and so on. These are the things we are exploring. We're not saying that we have settled on anything yet, but we have to be mindful that there is this risk as students travel to and from school, and to see how best we can mitigate that. For students who are in rural areas, we have to coordinate that with their schools to see how best we can help our students so that they're not in the same vehicle with the general population. And in terms of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, what I do know currently is that members of parliament are allowed to put forward names of interested individuals in the farm work program. As long as I've been an MP, I've been on a yearly basis been afforded that opportunity, and so what Minister Samuda announced was not anything different from what has been happening over the years.
Thank you, Minister Williams. The very final question now to Javon Keys from TVJ.
Thank you so much. Well, my question was asked, but I didn't get a response to it. That's regarding the number of students who have preliminarily deferred. So I had asked a question earlier, but I didn't get a response.
So we wouldn't know that yet because the deadline has not come. The deadline has been extended to May 14th. So we have to wait until that time to get a sense of how many students would have deferred their CSEC or CAPE. As you well know, students can do some of their subjects this year. They can do some next year, January, or next year, June. So there are many options. As you can see from the numbers, we're pretty close to the numbers that registered last year, right, and prior years for the exam. So when we look at the deferral, we're not expecting to see huge numbers there at all for CSEC or for CAPE, given the registration numbers that we know now.
Thank you, Minister Williams, and that is how we are going to close out our post-cabinet press briefing this morning. I want to say a very special thank you to the members of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, that is the Honorable Minister of State, Honorable Nesta Morgan, Robert Nesta Morgan, Minister of State, and the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Minister Williams was also supported by our Acting Permanent Secretary, Dr. Grace McLean, and also our Acting Chief Education Officer, Dr. Cassandra Troop. See you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you to our media partners who participated and asked their question. And we want to say a very, very happy Teachers' Day to all our teachers across the island this morning. Have a wonderful morning and a wonderful rest of the week.